Michael Perrone, welcome. Okay.
Hi, Tim.
Yeah, so we are on your home turf.
This is Work Lab. This is a startup incubator here at downtown Worcester.
Okay, so Worcester, Massachusetts, and this is your home. This is your home area. This is where you lived for quite a while then.
Yeah, about 10 years now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it's nice. Actually, it's a really nice, clean city. It's a beautiful old building. This is where you're doing your research at. And so, can you tell me a little bit about some of the projects that you're currently working on?
So, I'm working on a variety of things here. The main focus at the moment is something called non-equilibrium steady-state thermodynamics. So, I mean, the simplest one you might think of is a waterfall. So if you have like a stream that's flowing, there's an input and an output, and in the meantime, there's some potential energy that's being used up. But as long as there's still input energy and output energy, it's at a steady state configuration. What's a little bit less well known is that there are certain non-equilibrium steady states that can happen with a single heat bath, unlike a Carnot engine. And these were originally described by Vladislav Capek at University of UC San Diego. And then Daniel Sheehan, who worked with Vladislav Capek. I think his first relatively widely accepted demonstration of this concept is with something he called epicatalysis. So basically, around 1,000 Celsius, there's some population of there's a tail on the Boltzmann distribution, which is sufficiently high energy that it can split hydrogen molecules into hydrogen atoms. And so if you have different adsorption chemistry on two surfaces, I believe he used rhenium and tungsten as his example on APEC. He's mentioned other combinations that work even better that we're looking at, or we will be looking at. And so the idea is with rhenium and tungsten, if you just have two wires or plates of these materials near each other in a very thin hydrogen atmosphere, then rhenium will tend to recombine hydrogen and tungsten will tend to split hydrogen. But the recombination into hydrogen molecules is exothermic and the splitting is endothermic on the two surfaces. So the tungsten will cool down and the rhenium will heat up, or the other way around. I might have that backwards, but which one does the splitting, which one does the recombining, at least.
We're talking about energy and chemistry. Those are your focus areas.
It's more or less. I mean, we do a lot of things here, mostly focused around condensed matter physics. We're trying to focus mostly around experiment, because a lot of condensed matter physics, you can really only simulate it on quantum computers. And at that price point for supercomputer time or quantum computer time, sometimes it makes more sense to just throw it together in a lab and see what it does. And having my mathematical background is very useful to that, because in undergrad I studied a lot of mathematical proofs and lemmas. And so there's like suprema and minima and things. There's like you can put boundaries on the behavior of a system within a reasonable degree much more easily than you can find an explicit solution to some of these equations. Like you can potentially even do that on paper. So when you're looking at these complicated equations, like mathematically, there's some bounds you can put on the behavior, and that highly simplifies the thing, and then you just search the rest of the space manually by combining things in the lab. And that kind of gets that lets you get a lot further with experiment than you otherwise could with just theory.
Okay, and so these are just a couple of your experiments. Now, some of the other things that you've mentioned to me, and I'm trying to kind of go from memory, one of them that may be on the upcoming future is you've looked at battery technologies, you looked at aluminum sulfur as a potential more efficient replacement for today's lithium-ion batteries, right?
Well, the kinetics can be sluggish, so that's the challenge with multivalent ions. Like if you have +3 charge on aluminum, then the preferred kinetics chemically are usually in favor of so if you use a sulfide-based electrolyte, then that will work, but those sulfide-based electrolytes only survive about 500 charges. And if you use an aluminum chloride-based electrode, then it'll favor the formation of AlCl4-. And so yeah, there are challenges involved in that, but I think it's achievable to get around those challenges. And more generally, if I can finish for the rhenium and the tungsten. So the rhenium and tungsten, you have that in a single heat bath at 1,000 Celsius, and the two materials actually develop a temperature difference between them. At least, I believe Dan Sheehan's team did that with a thermal camera, so I'd really like to do that with a thermocouple instead.
Oh, okay.
And that's what we're looking at doing at some point soon. And yeah, so but yeah, I mean, if you have rhenium and tungsten, you get this spontaneous temperature difference that forms based on their surface chemistries at 1,000 C. And so, like, Dan Sheehan's insight there is that it has most of thermodynamics looks at the intrinsic properties of materials and neglects the boundary conditions. But boundary conditions in mathematics and physics are extremely important. And so there's a whole bunch of situations you can make with boundaries between materials that allow potential thermal energy harvesting or recycling or weird things like that.
Okay, so yeah, again, really, really exciting stuff. And again, energy and chemistry seem to be kind of the two go-to areas for a lot of your research. So in this area, and I'll try and get some video later and kind of walk people through it. I'm going to get some photos as well. You've got basically looks like about 4 kind of cube table areas, right, that you're working on in this space. So.
Yeah, and I mean, energy is really important too, because we have other labs working on propulsion and things, and if you don't have the energy to power that propulsion system to begin with, then you're not going anywhere fast, So, and also the energy problem is the more pressing matter on Earth at the moment. Although there's a lot of promising technologies. I saw deep plasma drilling looks interesting recently. I mentioned that I think before on APEC at some point, but. The idea there is actually a group of people from Commonwealth Fusion Systems started this company when they were trying to engineer plasma diverters for fusion reactors, and they kept corroding into the plasma, basically evaporating, even though they were made of tungsten and stuff like that. So they used that same plasma effect to drill through rock. And since it's non-damageable, you can do that drilling operation in a single pass. And so that makes deep well drilling much, much more efficient.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so that means you can access geothermal power anywhere in the world. So that would be huge if they can do it. Then we wouldn't necessarily even need fusion or fission, at least not in the near term. Yeah, that's an exciting technology.
Well, I don't want to forget LK99, because that is something that you're continuing to push forward with as well. And so that was, several months back, there was a giant hubbub about this LK99 room temperature superconductor. And since then, there have been a lot of experiments that I guess have cast doubt on it, right?
Right.
And so mainstream science, from what I understand, got interested and then kind of moved on and said, you know what, there's probably nothing there. But that wasn't as definitive as some people like to believe. And so you're one of the few who is pushing forward because you think there actually may be something, right?
Right, yeah. So, I mean, a month or so ago, maybe 2 months now, there was a company, SCTL, that was posting some YouTube videos, somewhere a bit questionable, but one of them really does look like flux pinning. Now there is another explanation of that possibly involving the rotation of some particle that has regions of diamagnetism and paramagnetism on it, and so you could get something that looks like pinning under those circumstances. But really, it looks very promising what they showed, and so it really merits some more attempts. The other thing is we've also been able to replicate. So we have lead phosphate, copper phosphate, lead copper apatite mix that we made, doped with sulfur and phosphorus, like a little bit of so effectively a little bit reduced.
Okay.
So
okay.
A little bit under oxidized, and that sample that we made following SCTL's process exhibits surprisingly strong paramagnetism for only having copper and lead in it.
Okay.
So we can get a video of that later as well. And so there's something weird going on there magnetically. So we're thinking we play around a little bit more. We're probably pretty close to the working recipe with that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So these are just a few, again, of the many projects that you're juggling right now. So what are some of the other things that come to mind? Now, you'd mentioned, like right now, it seems like geothermal, this prospect of looking at geothermal energy is really exciting, right?
Yeah, well, we're not doing that one. I just wanted to mention them because that's they're getting a lot of momentum now, and they deserve that attention there. That's a really promising technology.
Yeah.
For the near term. So one other thing that I guess everyone's trying to replicate it right now, but we're looking at Charles Bueller's thruster.
Okay.
So
okay.
We're trying to make like a little pinwheel. So the idea is if you have a single capacitor plate kind of following so the Charles Bueller's thing is kind of a natural improvement upon Thomas Townsend Brown's work.
Yeah.
So if you have a single plate, if you have any electrostatic thrusting device and you just have one of them, then there's a whole bunch of asymmetries there, and you could just be measuring electrostatic attraction to something in the environment. Even if you try to position it really well in some Faraday, in some not a Faraday, in a vacuum chamber, like if you try to center it really well, it's still asymmetric, so it's unstable towards going to some minimum energy position. So what we're doing is we have like 4 of these devices arranged in like a pinwheel, so that they should spin. If this thing is actually producing thrust, they should just undergo runaway acceleration until it comes apart. So we'll see.
Well, the thing that really excites me about Charles Bueller's work, and then Andrew Urigma, and I was just actually down there in Florida last week with both of them, is they are working collaboratively with yourself, with Mark Sokol, with the community, right? And so they're learning and sharing. They're protected through their patents, and they of course have their own set of proprietary information, for follow-up patents. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the mainstay technology, they are working very collaboratively to try and build the future with other people like yourself. And that's exciting because you're able to network using Zoom calls and remote teleconferencing, things like that, right? So.
Yeah, and I really appreciate their openness with that project, considering that most of these companies that do these things, they get, very nervous when you try to talk about open sourcing or anything. And everyone just has their patents, and then there's maybe squabbles over patents, and then maybe like the government steps in and buys the patent and shelves it. And so that's been the standard for the past 50 years. Most of the people looking into this stuff have gone that way. But I mean, at least they're working with the open source stuff, and that gives them a leg up, I think, against any other competition like that.
Absolutely.
In terms of now they can point to maybe the thruster that someone else makes is not as good, but it at least demonstrates a concept in an open source way, so other people can try it out for like pennies And yeah, I mean, you really need that to really convince big investors about this. You need to show the thing off.
Yeah.
Publicly, ideally. Like if you have private showings and things, like it's not gonna go well, you know?
Well, and
it's just asking for the thing to be shelved and hidden.
You know, from my perspective, these challenges of working alone and trying to silo information that have plagued this community for decades and killed numerous projects are the exact same driving forces that led to the creation of science journals, science conferences, scientific communities and professional associations, right? So in a strange sort of way, these aren't new problems, but maybe it's because this is such an emergent grassroots-based community, we're just kind of realizing that we have common problems and solving the same ones again for the first time.
I mean, my go-to example with open source is Linux. Like people got, I mean, actually, well, Linux came before Windows, but like as people kind of got tired with Windows, more and more people contributed to Linux, and now it's a really successful competitor to Windows, even though it makes like a tiny amount of money overall compared to Windows. Like everyone gets enough value out of it that it's worth it to them to contribute. And that's what we're trying to build, because I think in terms of these technologies, it's not a zero-sum game, and the amount of total benefit to society, I think society, there will be a lot less reason for conflict if we have actual energy sources that can take care of the lower rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for most of society.
Absolutely. I think Linux is a great comparison. And to take that even further, even though the Linux code itself, that core, is open source, you have hardware manufacturers that have built very successful businesses. You have custom software manufacturers. You have Linux distros, right? Like Red Hat and Debian and others. And they all have built profitable businesses in various ways. And they all have, to a greater or lesser degree, some amount of proprietary or confidential information, but they also participate in an open community. And so they are able to share and benefit from working with all of these other scientists.
Exactly, and this whole ecosystem that's created around Linux, that's what we're going to see with these technologies eventually as well. Maybe you're not going to make a ton of money on the basic thruster or the basic energy production, but then you can go mine asteroids. There's asteroids out there that on their own have more platinum than all the platinum ever mined on Earth.
Yeah,
that's going to be huge.
Truly exciting. Now, do you see the same thing happening with your energy technologies? Because you're really pushing the boundaries on a lot of different fundamental physical principles there. Do you see that becoming kind of an open source community? I know that there is an open source energy community out there already, but they seem to be more focused on magnet motors and the Bedini motor and things like that. What you're working with are fundamental physical principles, and you are staying very close to rigorously proven science.
That's what needs to happen, because ultimately, like, there's probably been thousands of garage inventors who have maybe figured out something or other that works, but then they cannot convince the rest of society that it's real because they just don't have the educational background or the terminology to explain their invention in a common language with the rest of humanity. And so what really needs to happen to make a breakthrough with this stuff is we need to understand the not just like, okay, we have this device that works. We want to understand the fundamental principle that makes this device and all other devices like it operate. So if we have the fundamental principles, that enriches all of humanity. Like I think David Chester was talking about on his recent APEC talk, that there's maybe one additional degree of freedom in quantum information, and that just understanding that simple concept, that could make either a no-go theorem for quantum computing, or that could explain why quantum computers haven't really gone mainstream as much. Like that could explain why it's been so difficult, because they're actually missing this extra quantum information there, and that's just scrambling all of their results
Okay.
and adding noise that would otherwise not be there. So these fundamental, like, it's hard to understate the breadth of the reach of the concepts that we're discussing.
Yeah, they are big concepts,
yeah.
and they have long-term lasting impact.
And it's not just, like, science is extremely interconnected. It will, like, there'll be, like, with, like, I'm starting to see what I think Amy, was her name?
Amy Eskridge.
Yeah, Amy Eskridge. I'm starting to see, I think I'm starting to understand what she was talking about when she was talking about like gravitational chemistry.
Okay.
So like from mainstream physics, who the heck knows what gravitational chemistry looks like? If you can actually change the vacuum ground state while chemical interactions are happening, you can change what chemistry happens.
Oh, okay.
In all sorts of, like, you have a lot of flexibility to do that as well. So, I mean, maybe that explains some of the cold fusion results. I don't know. But I think that, like, the model right now with, like, dark energy, dark matter, these are modern epicycles. Just like our understanding of like when we went to the geocentric to the heliocentric model, all of these weird rotations that the planets went in, they became circles or elliptical orbits, and the model was greatly simplified. And we are on the cusp of something like that, I think, in all the research, not just here, but like in all of the labs we're collaborating. Like, we're getting to something big, I think.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Michael, let me thank you again so much. Thank you. Thank you for your time. It is exciting to be here. It is exciting to see everything that is going on. Again, this is your home area. This is your lab. I'm so excited to be able to join you here.
Sure. Thanks for visiting, Tim.